The hall was the largest thing any human had ever stood inside. Its ceiling stretched so high that clouds actually formed between the crystal pillars, and the floor beneath Ambassador Lena Vasquez's boots was made of something that looked like frozen starlight. The Grand Conclave on Thesara Prime was built to make visitors feel small. It was working. 12 seats rose in a wide half-circle before her, each one carved to fit a different body. In those seats sat the speakers of the Galactic Council, the Concord of 12, beings who had ruled this galaxy long before humans ever looked up at the night sky and wondered what was out there. Some of them were tall and thin, with skin like polished silver. Others were heavy and scaled, with eyes that burned like hot coals. One was barely visible at all, just a shimmer in the air that sometimes looked like a face. Lena stood alone in the center of the floor. No table, no chair. That was on purpose. Ambassador Vasquez, said the first speaker, a Torvon, a massive reptilian creature whose voice sounded like stones grinding together. Your species stands accused of violating developmental boundaries under Section 9 of the Galactic Accord. How does humanity answer? Lena kept her back straight. We answer that we were never told gravity lensing technology was restricted. It does not appear in any document shared with provisional members. Our engineers on Kalem 4 built it because they saw a problem and solved it. That is not a crime. That is progress. A ripple of sounds moved through the hall. Some of the speakers made noises that might have been laughter. The Torvon leaned forward, his massive jaw opening slightly to show rows of teeth. Progress, he repeated, as if the word tasted bad. Your species has existed in space for barely 2 centuries. You were given adequate technology for your level. The gravity lensing drive is a Tier 9 system, reserved for civilizations that have proven their maturity over millennia. You did not earn it. You stole the concept from the universe itself, like children playing with fire. We didn't steal anything, Lena said. We invented it, independently. If your laws punish invention, then your laws need to change. The hall went very quiet. No one spoke to the council that way, not ever. The vote took less than an hour. 11 voices said guilty. Only one, Speaker Thyrol of the Valesi, a being that looked like a tall, thin figure wrapped in light, voted against. Thyrol said nothing during the debate. They simply raised a slender hand when the time came, and then lowered it, and watched Lena with eyes that seemed sad. The sentence was exile. Total and complete. Humanity would lose every colony in the Mid-Rim. Every trade agreement would be cancelled. Every human ship would be removed from Council-controlled space within 1 galactic standard year. And they would be sent to the only place the Council had left for them, the Shatter Expanse, the outermost arm of the galaxy, where dead stars and radiation storms made life nearly impossible. No Council species had ever survived there. It was not a relocation. It was a death sentence wrapped in legal language. Lena listened to it all without moving. When they finished, she looked at the 12 seats one last time. You will regret this, she said. Not as a threat, as a fact. Then she turned and walked out of the hall, her boots clicking on that frozen starlight floor, and she did not look back. The news hit Earth like a bomb. Every screen on every continent carried the broadcast. 14 billion people watched their ambassador stand alone in that alien hall and be told they were no longer welcome in the galaxy they had spent 200 years trying to join. In a gray room deep beneath the mountains of what used to be Switzerland, Fleet Admiral Marcus Cole sat at the head of a long table surrounded by generals, admirals, and political leaders of the United Terran Commonwealth. The room was loud. People were shouting. Some wanted to fight. Some wanted to beg. A few just looked lost. Cole was 63 years old. His hair was white and his face was lined, with the kind of marks that come from making hard decisions for a long time. He had built the colonial fleet. He had overseen humanity's expansion to 11 worlds. He had shaken hands with alien diplomats and smiled through his teeth while they treated him like a clever pet. He let them shout for a while. Then he hit the table with his fist, once, hard. The room went silent. "They want us to fight," he said. His voice was low and rough. "That is the trap. If we attack, every species in the Council will unite against us, and they will wipe us out in a month. If we beg, they will add conditions and chains until we are slaves in everything but name." He looked around the table. "We will do neither." "Then what?" asked General Huang, his face red with anger. "We leave," Cole said. "All of us. Every ship, every person, every piece of technology we have. We take it all to the Shatter Expanse, and we build something new." The room erupted again. The Expanse was a wasteland. Radiation would cook them. There were no habitable planets, no safe routes, no resources. Cole let them talk. Then he pulled up a map, a massive holographic display of the galaxy's outer arm. It was dark, empty, terrifying. 200 years ago, he said quietly, Earth was the only world we had. We had no FTL drives, no alien allies, no galactic map. We had nothing but stubbornness and the refusal to accept that the universe was too big for us. He pointed at the dark expanse on the map. "This is no different. They see a graveyard out there. I see room." He called it Operation Long Walk. Within weeks, the plans were drawn. 6,000 ships would make the journey, massive arc ships that could carry millions, military escorts, science vessels, cargo haulers loaded with everything humanity could strip from its soon-to-be-lost colonies. It would be the largest migration in human history. It would be dangerous, desperate, and many would die. But they would go together, and they would not go quietly. On the day the Exodus fleet launched, billions of humans across 11 worlds looked up at the sky and watched the ships rise. On alien stations along the route, crowds gathered to see the convoy pass. Some of the aliens laughed. A few simply stared in silence, unable to understand why the humans did not look broken. Because they didn't. The ships flew in tight formation. Their lights blazed against the dark, and painted on the hull of the flagship, the UTS Perseverance, in letters large enough to be read from 100 kilometers away, were 4 words. "We will remember this." Lena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the Perseverance and watched Council space shrink behind them. Beside her, Admiral Cole stared ahead into the black unknown. "Think they'll miss us?" Lena asked. Cole didn't smile. "Not yet," he said, "but they will." The fleet flew on into the dark, toward the edge of everything. Behind them, the galaxy carried on as if nothing had changed. But something had. A door had been closed, and the people on the other side of it were not the kind who stayed locked out for long. The Concord of 12 had made their decision. Now, humanity would make theirs. The Shatter Expanse greeted them with death. 3 days past the border of Council space, the first radiation storm hit. It came without warning, a wave of energy that rolled out from a collapsed star like an invisible wall of fire. The fleet's shields held on the larger ships, but 4 smaller transports on the outer edge were not so lucky. Their systems fried in seconds. Their hulls cracked. 2,000 people died before anyone could reach them. Admiral Cole stood on the bridge of the Perseverance and listened to the damage reports. His hands were steady, but his jaw was tight. He had known this would happen. He had planned for losses. But planning for death and watching it happen were 2 very different things. "Pull the formation tighter," he ordered. "Put the military ships on the outside. They have the heaviest shielding. Civilian vessels stay in the center. No exceptions." But the Expanse was not finished with them. Over the next 6 months, The fleet lost 41 ships. Some were taken by radiation. Some were pulled off course by gravity wells, invisible traps left behind by dead stars that dragged anything nearby into spiraling orbits with no escape. One cargo ship simply vanished. It was there on the sensors, and then it was not. No signal, no wreckage, just gone. Every loss was felt. On the Ark ships, where millions lived packed together in conditions that were never meant to last this long, fear was starting to spread. Food was rationed. Water recyclers were running beyond their limits. Children who had grown up on green colony worlds now lived in metal hallways that hummed and shook. But humans are strange creatures. The worse things got, the harder they held on to each other. Strangers shared meals. Engineers worked double shifts to keep failing systems alive. Teachers held classes in cargo bays. Musicians played in hallways. Someone painted a mural on the wall of Ark Ship 7. A sunrise over an ocean, done from memory, because most of the people on that ship would never see a real sunrise again. Crowds gathered just to look at it. Deep in the science wing of the Perseverance, Dr. Anya Osei was not looking at paintings. She was looking at signals. Anya was 40 years old, thin and focused, with the kind of mind that saw patterns where others saw noise. She was a xenoarchaeologist. Her job was studying the ruins and remains of dead civilizations. Before the exile, she had spent her career examining scraps and fragments that the Council allowed humans to access, always under supervision, always with restrictions. Now there were no restrictions, and the signals she was picking up were unlike anything she had ever seen. They came from deep inside the expanse. Faint pulses of energy, repeating in a pattern that was too regular to be natural. They did not match any known species. They did not match any known technology. They were old, very old, possibly millions of years old. They're beacons, Anya told Cole when she brought her findings to him. Someone put them there on purpose, and they are still working after all this time. Who? Cole asked. The architects. Anya pulled up everything she had on them, which was not much. The architects were a mystery even to the Council, a precursor civilization that had existed millions of years ago and then disappeared. Ruins of their works had been found across the galaxy, but most were sealed, broken, or too advanced to understand. The Council treated architect sites like museums, interesting to look at, dangerous to touch. They left a trail, Anya said, and it leads deeper into the expanse. Cole studied the map for a long time. The beacons formed a path, curving through the dead stars and gravitational chaos, like a road through a forest. At the end of the path, the signals got stronger, much stronger. What's at the end? He asked. I don't know, Anya admitted, but it's big. Cole did not make the decision lightly. Following the beacons meant taking the fleet off the only route they had mapped and pushing into completely unknown space. If Anya was wrong, they could lose everything. But if she was right, there might be something out there worth finding. And staying on their current path was a slow death anyway. We follow the beacons, he said. While the fleet changed course, Corporal Ren Tanaka was already ahead of them. Tanaka was 24, a Marine on the scout frigate Kestrel, and he had been part of the forward teams that jumped ahead of the fleet to scan for dangers. It was the most dangerous job in the convoy. The scouts went in first, alone, into space that no one had ever mapped. The Kestrel found the station orbiting a collapsed star, a vast structure made of a dark metal that seemed to absorb light. It was Architect. There was no doubt. The design was like nothing any living species built, smooth and organic, like it had been grown rather than constructed. And it was still powered. After millions of years, lights still glowed inside it. Tanaka led his squad through the airlock, with weapons ready and hearts hammering. The corridors inside were huge, built for beings much larger than humans. The walls were covered in symbols, flowing, complex writing that seemed to shift when you looked at it from different angles. But it was what they found in the central chamber that changed everything. A map. A massive three-dimensional map made of light, showing the entire Shatter expanse. And on that map, dozens of points glowed, each one marking the location of an architect's structure. Some were small, some were enormous, and one, far deeper in the expanse than anyone had gone, was so large that Tanaka could not even understand what he was looking at. And there was something else. The symbols on the walls. Anya would later spend weeks studying them, shared something with ancient human languages. Not the words themselves, but the structure, the way they were built, the logic underneath them. It was like finding a stranger's handwriting and realizing it looked like your own. When Anya saw the data Tanaka brought back, she did not sleep for 3 days. She decoded part of the beacon signal, and what she found made her hands shake. The largest point on the map was a stellar engine, a machine designed to reignite dead stars. The architects had built a device that could bring suns back to life. She brought the findings to Cole. He sat in silence for a long time, staring at the map. "A machine that lights stars," he said. "Yes. And it's been sitting out here for millions of years waiting." "Yes." Cole leaned back in his chair. For the first time since the exile, something that was not pain or duty crossed his face. It might have been hope. "Show me the way," he said. The fleet turned deeper into the expanse, following the trail the architects had left behind. Behind them in council space, the galaxy had already moved on. Humanity's departure was old news. The 12 speakers returned to their business, confident that the human problem had been solved. In a year, maybe 2, the radiation and the cold and the emptiness would finish what the exile had started. Only Speaker Thyrol thought differently. Alone in their chambers on Thesara Prime, the Valesi Elder pulled up ancient records, texts so old that even other Valesi had forgotten them. Texts that spoke of the architects and of a choice they had made, long before any current species existed. They had left their greatest works, not in the safe, warm center of the galaxy, but at its edges. And they had done this for a reason. Thyrol read the words again, the ones that had made them vote against exile, when every other speaker voted for it. The words said, "The inheritors will come from fire and stubbornness. They will be cast out, and they will find what we left for them." Thyrol closed the file and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, in the dark, 6,000 human ships were flying towards something the rest of the galaxy did not understand yet. But they would. Soon enough, they would. 3 years after the exile, the rogue planet had a name. They called it Anchor because that is what it became, the fixed point around which everything else was built. It was a world without a sun, drifting alone through the black, and it was the most beautiful thing the people of the Exodus fleet had ever seen. Not because it was pretty. It was a frozen ball of rock and iron, ugly as a fist. It was beautiful because it was theirs. The engineers hollowed out its core in 8 months. They used architect energy fields, the ones Dr. Anya Osei's team had spent 2 years learning to control, to create a shield around the planet that blocked the worst of the expanse's radiation. Inside the hollow core, they built Nova Anchorage, the first true city of humanity's second age. It was rough and unfinished, and nothing worked quite right. But when the lights came on for the first time, and 50,000 people stood in the central plaza and looked up at a ceiling instead of the hull of a ship, some of them cried. Admiral Cole did not cry. He was not the type. But he stood in that plaza with his hands behind his back, and his old eyes took in every face. And something in his chest that had been wound tight for 3 years finally loosened, just a little. They had survived. Now it was time to build. Without the Council's rules, human engineers did what they had always done when no one was watching them. they invented. The gravity lensing drive, the same technology that had gotten them exiled in the first place, was torn apart, improved, rebuilt, and mass-produced. Human ships became the fastest things in the expanse. They could jump between systems in hours instead of days, and change direction mid-jump in ways that would make a council navigator's head spin. But the drives were just the beginning. The real prize was the stellar engine. Anya had found it exactly where the architect map said it would be, a machine the size of a small moon, orbiting the cold remains of a star that had died 1 billion years ago. It took 6 months just to figure out how to turn it on. 3 engineers died in the process. But on the day that Anya's team sent the activation signal and the ancient machine hummed to life, everything changed. The dead star flickered, then it glowed, then it blazed. A new sun was born in the darkness, burning gold and steady, pouring heat and light into a system that had been cold since before life existed on Earth. They called it Nova Sol. People poured out of every building and corridor, and looked up through the shields, and saw it. A star, their star, burning where nothing had burned for 1 billion years. A woman in the crowd said it first, and it spread through the expanse like fire through dry grass. We light our own suns. Within a week, it was painted on walls, etched into hull plates, and stitched into patches that every human wore. It was not a slogan. It was a statement of fact. Over the next 2 years, humanity reignited 6 more stars. Each one was a new system, a new home. Planets that had been frozen rocks were warmed into something livable. Not comfortable, not yet, but possible. And possible was enough. The Void Forges came next. Human scientists discovered that the expanse was full of exotic particles and dark matter concentrations that did not exist in Council space. Their ruins contained designs for orbital factories, massive stations that could harvest this material and turn it into things the Council had never seen. Metals that were lighter than aluminum, but stronger than anything known. Energy cells that lasted decades. Hull plating that absorbed weapon fire like a sponge absorbing water. The Council had spent 50,000 years refining the same old technologies, carefully controlled and carefully limited. Humanity, free of those limits and desperate enough to try anything, leaped ahead in 3 years. But Cole knew that technology alone would not save them. People needed purpose. They needed a reason to keep going beyond survival. So the Commonwealth of the Edge was born, a new government, built from scratch, with a simple founding idea. Anyone who worked earned their place. It did not matter where you came from. It did not matter what you looked like. It did not matter what species you were. And that last part mattered more than anyone expected. The Kreth arrived first. They were insectoid, 6-legged, armored, with clicking voices and compound eyes that saw in spectrums humans could not imagine. The Council had once called them a developing species and placed sanctions on their trade that kept them poor and dependent for centuries. When word reached them that humans were building something new at the edge of the galaxy, a fleet of Kreth cargo ships appeared at Nova Anchorage and asked for shelter. Cole let them in without hesitation. Then came the Dulani, tall, thin, gray-skinned nomads who had lived on trading ships for generations, because the Council had declared them non-persons over a legal dispute 3,000 years ago. They had no homeworld, no rights, no voice. The Edge gave them all 3. A handful of Valesi came too, slipping out of Council space in secret. Speaker Thyrol had sent them, scientists and historians carrying ancient records that the Valesi had kept hidden from the other Council species. Records about the architects, about what they had built, about why they had left. The Edge was becoming something the Council had never seen, a civilization that grew stronger by welcoming others instead of controlling them. Lieutenant Ren Tanaka, who had grown harder and quieter in the 3 years since the exile, led the expedition that found the Athenaeum. It was the largest architect ruin anyone had ever seen. A structure buried inside an asteroid that was itself the size of a small planet. Its corridors went on for hundreds of kilometers. Its walls were lined with data storage devices that held more information than every library in Council space combined. Anya Osei walked into the central archive chamber and stopped breathing for a moment. The room was vast, and in its center, a holographic display still worked after millions of years. It showed the galaxy as the architects had known it. Every star, every planet, every species that had existed in their time. And it showed what the architects had done before they vanished. They had not gone extinct. They had ascended, moved beyond physical form into something else, something that existed outside normal space. But before they left, they had done one final thing. They had seeded the galaxy with genetic material. Carefully designed, carefully placed, encoded to eventually produce a species that could find the expanse, activate the machines, and carry on the architect's work. Anya ran the genetic analysis 4 times to make sure. Each time the result was the same. The markers in the architect design matched human DNA. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Humanity had not stumbled into the Shatter Expanse by accident. They had been designed to end up here, millions of years before the first human ever walked on Earth. She brought the discovery to Cole and Tanaka in a sealed room. She showed them everything. When she finished, the room was very quiet. "So we were made for this?" Tanaka said. His voice was flat. He was not sure how he felt about it. "Maybe," Anya said carefully. "Or maybe they just gave us the potential, and we chose to live up to it. There is a difference." Cole stared at the data for a long time. Then he made a decision that would be debated for generations. "This stays classified for now. The people out there are building something because they chose to, because they refuse to die, because they are stubborn and angry and brave. I will not turn that into a story about destiny. They did this, not some ancient plan. Them." Anya and Tanaka agreed. The secret was locked away. Outside, the edge grew. New species arrived. New stars were lit. Factories hummed, and ships flew. And children were born who had never known Council space, who thought of the expanse not as a prison, but as a home. And far away in the comfortable halls of Thessera Prime, the Concord of 12 went about their business, and did not think about the humans at all. They were sure the problem had been solved. The humans were gone. The galaxy was orderly again. They did not know about the new stars burning in the dark. They did not know about the void forges, or the architect machines, or the alliance of species growing at the galaxy's edge. But they would learn, and when they did, they would be afraid. Because the exiles had stopped being exiles. They had become something else entirely, something that the Council, in all its 50,000 years of wisdom, had never imagined. The sensor officer on Thessera Prime saw the readings and thought his equipment was broken. He ran the scan again, then a 3rd time. Then he called his superior. His superior called the military directorate. The military directorate called an emergency session of the Concord of 12. It all happened in less than 4 hours, which was the fastest the Council had moved on anything in 1,000 years. The readings were simple and impossible. 14 new stars were burning in the Shatter Expanse. Not natural stars, they had been ignited. Someone had turned on dead suns, one after another, like someone lighting candles in a dark room. The energy signatures were massive, and between those new stars, thousands of ships moved in organized patterns, surrounding structures that did not match any known design. The humans had not died. The humans had built an empire. 10 years, that was all it had taken. 10 years since the exile, and humanity had gone from a convoy of desperate refugees to a civilization that rivaled species that had existed for millennia. The first speaker, the same Torvald who had read out the sentence of exile, stared at the data and felt something he had not felt in a very long time: fear. The emergency session was chaos. 12 species, each with their own interests and their own terrors, shouted over each other in a hall that was designed for calm and order. The Torvald demanded action. "They are building a military force on our border," the first speaker growled, his massive tail sweeping the floor behind him. "Every day we wait, they grow stronger. We end this now, while we still can." Speaker Thyral of the Valesi rose from their seat, and their voice, though soft, cut through the noise like a blade. "We exiled them for inventing one technology. Now you wish to punish them for surviving? When does the cruelty end?" "This is not cruelty," the Torvald said. "This is security." "This is fear," Thyral replied, "and fear makes fools of old empires." The vote was called, the question whether to authorize a military response against humanity. It split down the middle. 6 species voted yes, 5 voted no. Thyral was the 12th vote, and they voted no, creating a tie. Under council rules, a tie meant no action. The Torvald did not care about council rules. Not anymore. Within 2 weeks, the Torvald hegemony assembled the largest military fleet in galactic history. They called it the Burning Arm. 40,000 warships pulled from every corner of Torvald space. Dreadnoughts half a kilometer long, carriers packed with fighter craft, cruisers with weapons that could crack the surface of a planet. 3 other council species quietly contributed ships and supplies, keeping their involvement unofficial. It was an invasion force, and everyone knew it, and no one stopped it. The fleet launched toward the Shatter Expanse with a single mission: destroy humanity completely. Admiral Cole received the intelligence report from Edge Scouts 13 days before the Torvald fleet reached the border. He read it twice, set it down, and looked out the window of his office on Nova Anchorage at the stars his people had lit. He was 73 now, old for a man who had spent his life in space. His body ached, and his hands were not as steady as they used to be. But his mind was sharp, and the mind was what mattered now. He activated the Commonwealth Defense Network and sent a single message to every human and allied ship in the Expanse: "They are coming. We will be ready." General Ren Tanaka, he was a general now, promoted after years of leading the most dangerous missions in the Edge. He had changed since the young Marine who had walked into that first architect ruin. He was harder, quieter, and he understood something that most military minds did not. The Expanse itself was a weapon. The Battle of the Threshold began on a Tuesday, by Earth's old calendar. Not that anyone was counting. The Torvald fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Expanse, and immediately ran into trouble. The gravitational anomalies that made the region so dangerous pulled at their ships, dragging formations apart. Radiation bursts disrupted their communications. Their navigation systems, designed for the orderly lanes of Council space, struggled with the chaos. Human ships were built for this chaos. They were smaller, faster, and their gravity lensing drives let them move in ways that should not have been possible, jumping short distances in the middle of combat, appearing behind enemy lines, vanishing before return fire could find them. Tanaka had spent years training his pilots to fight in the Expanse's madness. The Torvald had never even been here before. The first wave hit the Torvald vanguard like a storm. 300 human ships, moving in perfect coordinated bursts, tore through the leading Torvald formations and disappeared before the big dreadnoughts could even turn their guns. The Torvald lost 200 ships in the first hour. But the Burning Arm was huge. 200 ships was a scratch. The Torvald first speaker, commanding from the flagship Dominion of Fire, pushed his fleet forward in a massive wedge formation, using sheer numbers to absorb losses and drive deeper into the Expanse. Cole watched from the Perseverance, now positioned behind the main defense line. He let the Torvan push forward. He let them think they were winning. He let them get deeper into the expanse, where the gravitational anomalies were worse and the radiation was stronger. Then he gave the order. Dr. Anya Osei, working from a fortified research station hidden in an asteroid field, activated the Architect Defense Grid. It had taken her team 4 years to find it, understand it, and bring it online. A network of automated weapon platforms buried in the asteroids and debris fields of the region. They had been sleeping for millions of years. Now they woke up. Thousands of Architect platforms opened fire on the Torvan flanks. Energy beams of a type no living species had ever seen cut through Torvan shields like they were paper. Ships that had survived centuries of warfare were split apart in seconds. The Torvan formation, already struggling with the expanse's natural hazards, broke. And that was when Tanaka struck the heart. A strike team of 50 ships, led by Tanaka himself, aboard the frigate Kestrel, the same ship he had served on as a corporal, now upgraded beyond recognition, punched through the chaos toward the Dominion of Fire. The Torvan flagship was enormous, heavily shielded, and surrounded by escorts. It should have been untouchable. Tanaka's team used a gravity lensing jump to appear inside the escort perimeter, so close to the Dominion that the big ship's weapons could not depress low enough to fire on them. Marines in void suits launched from airlocks and breached the Torvan hull at 12 points simultaneously. Tanaka went in first, because he always went first. The fighting inside the Dominion was brutal and short. Torvan soldiers were bigger and stronger than humans, but the Marines had trained for close-quarters combat in zero gravity and darkness, and they had weapons made from void-forged materials that cut through Torvan armor. Tanaka's team reached the bridge in 40 minutes. The first speaker, wounded and surrounded, looked at the human general standing over him and said, "What are you?" Tanaka looked at him with eyes that held 10 years of exile, loss, and fury. "We are what you made us," he said. The Dominion of Fire was captured. With their flagship taken and their formation shattered, the Torvan fleet broke. Ships that had come to destroy humanity turned and ran, leaving behind wreckage and silence. Over 20,000 Torvan ships were destroyed or disabled. It was the worst military defeat in the history of the Galactic Council. Admiral Cole sat alone in his office after the battle and composed a message. He was tired and his hands hurt, and he had lost people today, good people who had followed him into the dark and would never see another sunrise. But this needed to be said. He opened a channel to every frequency in the galaxy, council and civilian alike, and spoke. "This is Fleet Admiral Marcus Cole of the Commonwealth of the Edge. Today the Torvan hegemony sent 40,000 warships to destroy us. They failed. We did not ask for this war. We did not seek it. But we will not apologize for winning it." He paused. "The Shatter Expanse is our home. We built it from nothing with our own hands. Anyone who comes here in peace is welcome. Anyone who comes here with weapons will find us ready. Send diplomats, not dreadnoughts, or next time, we will bring the fire to you." He closed the channel and leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. The message traveled at the speed of light across the galaxy, and every species that heard it understood the same thing. The galaxy had changed today. The exiles were not exiles anymore. They were a power, and they were not asking for permission. 15 years after the exile, the Torvan hegemony collapsed. It did not happen all at once. It happened the way old things break. Slowly, then completely. The defeat at the threshold had cracked the foundation, and everything built on top of it came crumbling down. The Torvan were a warrior species. Their entire culture was built on strength and dominance. For 10,000 years, no one had beaten them in open battle. Their military was the backbone of the Council's enforcement power. When that military was shattered by a species they had called primitive, something inside the hegemony broke that could not be fixed with new ships or new weapons. Civil war erupted between factions blaming each other for the disaster. Within 2 years, 3 separate Torvan governments were fighting for control of what was left, and none of them were winning. 3 other council species, the ones who had secretly helped fund the Burning Arm, pulled out of the Concord entirely. They called it a relic of a dead era, and they were right. The Concord of 12 was now the Concord of 8, and even those 8 could barely agree on anything. The institution that had ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years was falling apart, and the thing that had broken it was a species they had thrown away like garbage. In the Shatter Expanse, life went on. The Commonwealth of the Edge had grown into something that would have seemed impossible 15 years ago. 11 species now called the Edge home. Humanity was still at the center, but it was a center that held by choice, not by force. The Kreth had become the Commonwealth's finest engineers, their insectoid bodies perfect for the precision work of maintaining void forges. The Dulani ran the trade networks, their generations of nomadic experience making them natural merchants and diplomats. The Valesi dissidents served as historians and scientists, their ancient knowledge filling gaps that humanity could not fill alone. 42 star systems burned with light that humanity had put there. 20 of those stars had been dead rocks in the void before human hands and architect machines brought them back to life. Cities grew on worlds that had never known warmth. Factories produced materials that the Council could not make or match. Ships flew in and out of the Edge every day, carrying goods and people and ideas. It was not perfect. Nothing built by people ever is. There were disagreements and shortages and political arguments that went on for weeks. The Commonwealth's founding charter was already covered in amendments and patches where reality had not matched the original vision. But it worked, and it kept growing. Speaker Thyral came to Nova Anchorage on a quiet morning, without ceremony or announcement. They arrived on a small Valesi ship, alone except for a single aide, and they docked at a civilian port, like any other visitor. No guards, no flags, no diplomatic escort. They came not as a representative of the Council. The Council had not sent them. They came as an individual, carrying records that they had kept hidden for 15 years. Admiral Cole met them at the port. He was 78 now, retired from active command, but still consulted on everything important. His hair was completely white, and he moved more slowly than he used to, but his eyes were still sharp, and his handshake was still strong. Beside him stood General Tanaka, now in his late 30s, and Dr. Anya Osei, whose hair had gone gray at the temples from years of working with architect technology. The 4 of them sat in a plain room in Nova Anchorage with cups of tea. Actual tea, grown in hydroponic bays deep inside the planet. And Thyral spoke. "I voted against your exile," Thyral said. Their voice was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Not because I thought you were innocent. You were. But that was not my reason. I voted against it because of what I had read in the oldest Valesi archives, texts that are so ancient that even my own people have forgotten them." Thyral opened a device and projected symbols into the air above the table. They were architect symbols. Anya recognized them immediately, the same flowing script she had spent years decoding in the Athenaeum. "The architects did not leave the galaxy randomly," Thyral said. "They planned their departure for millions of years, and before they left, they did 2 things. First, they seeded the galaxy with the genetic potential for a species that could inherit their works. You already know this." Cole and Anya exchanged a glance. The classified discovery. They had told no one outside their inner circle. "Yes," Cole said carefully. "We know." "I thought you might." Thyral's expression was unreadable. "The second thing they did was leave a warning. This is what I came to share with you." The symbols changed. Anya leaned forward, reading them with practiced speed, and the color drained from her face. The architects did not ascend because they wanted to, Thyral said. They ascended because something was coming. Something from outside the galaxy, from the void between galaxies, where no light reaches and no species has ever gone. The architects called it the Hollow. They could not fight it. They could not negotiate with it. They could only leave and hope that the species they designed to come after them would be strong enough to face what they could not. The room was very quiet. Tea cooled in cups that no one was drinking from. How long? Tanaka asked. His voice was steady, because it always was, but his hands had tightened on the edge of the table. According to the architect timeline, Thyral said, it was due to return approximately now. Give or take a few centuries. The architects were not precise about this. They could not be. Cole sat back in his chair and let out a long, slow breath. He looked at his hands. Old hands, scarred hands, hands that had built a civilization from nothing. Then he looked at Tanaka, who was already thinking about defenses and fleet positions. Then at Anya, whose eyes were bright with the same fire that had driven her to decode architect signals in a cramped lab on a refugee ship 15 years ago. Well, Cole said, and there was something in his voice that was not quite a laugh, but was close to one. At least we won't be bored. The Council's diplomatic delegation arrived at Nova Anchorage 3 weeks later. It was a small group, representatives from the 8 remaining Concord species traveling under a flag of peace. They came to negotiate trade agreements and non-aggression pacts. But everyone in the room knew the truth. They came because they were afraid, and they needed help. She was 53 now, still sharp, still direct, and she sat across from council diplomats who had once looked down at her and treated her like she did not belong. Now they looked at her with something that might have been respect, or might have been the expression people make when they realize they have made a terrible mistake. The talks lasted a month. The Commonwealth agreed to trade partnerships, mutual defense considerations, and open borders for refugees from Council space. In return, the Council formally recognized the Commonwealth of the Edge as a sovereign galactic power with full standing, the same standing they had denied humanity 15 years earlier. When the agreement was signed, Vasquez stood and shook hands with the lead council diplomat, a being whose species had voted to exile her people. She shook their hand firmly and looked them in the eye and said, "Welcome to the Edge." That was all. She did not gloat. She did not remind them. She did not need to. On the evening after the signing, Vasquez stood on the observation deck of Nova Anchorage. It was the highest point in the city, a platform of transparent metal that looked out through the planet's shields at the stars beyond. A new star was being ignited today, the 21st since the exile. Even from this distance, she could see the flare of it, a tiny spark of gold, growing brighter and brighter in the dark. Cole found her there. He moved slowly these days, leaning on a cane that Tanaka had made for him from void-forged metal. He stood beside her and watched the new star grow. "Thyral's warning," Vasquez said, "the thing from outside the galaxy. Do you think it's real?" "I think the architects were not the type to make things up," Cole said. "And you think we can face it, whatever it is?" Cole was quiet for a moment. Below them, the city hummed with the sounds of 11 species living and working and building together. 15 years ago, he said, they threw us into the darkest corner of the galaxy and expected us to disappear. We lit our own suns. We built cities inside dead worlds. We took in every species the Council threw away, and we made something together that none of us could have made alone. He looked at her. If something is coming out of the void, it picked the wrong galaxy. Vasquez smiled. It was a real smile, the kind she had not worn much since that day in the council hall. "They threw us into the dark," she said, "and we became the light," Cole replied. They stood together and watched the star ignite, 21 fires burning in a place where nothing had burned for 1 billion years. And somewhere, at the very farthest edge of the expanse, past the last star humanity had lit, past the last architect beacon, past everything known and mapped and named, a sensor buoy detected something. A signal. Faint. Vast. Moving. Something was out there. Something old and enormous, crossing the void between galaxies with the patience of a thing that had all the time in the universe. It was coming. And for the first time in millions of years, there was someone waiting for it. Not with fear, not with surrender, but with 14 reignited stars, a fleet built from the bones of ancient gods, and the stubborn, unbreakable will of a species that had been told it was not good enough, and it answered by lighting the dark. Humanity was ready.